I'm letting the others,
Nice.
Before disclosing any information about the seller's property, history, the house.
Well, you're almost there. We always look at agency from a buyer's point of view, right? Unfortunately, obviously there's buyers and sellers agency. Very clear what the law says, or the state says, before any blank information is disclosed. What is the blank? Confidential information. And what's considered confidential information? Do you want this?
Yeah.
Please. What's considered confidential information? If somebody calls you up, and let's say, for all you guys that are on Mike's team, Mike gives you a lead, and, well, see, this is a little goofy. Okay. Let's say it was a listing lead. And the person says, I want to list my house. You get on the phone with them, I want to list, and they say, I want to list my house. Is that confidential information? Okay. If they come running into, they say, can you come out to my house tomorrow? Obviously, you want to go list your house. You want to list your house tomorrow. So if you leave it at that and say, okay, I'm going to go out there and go list their house tomorrow, that's fine. No confidential information. But I would like to think you guys would start asking some questions on the phone. Wouldn't that make more sense? Such as what their motivation is. What if they start talking about, I'm getting divorced, I'm getting transferred, I'm losing my house. Is that confidential information at that point?
Yes.
Absolutely it is. So you've got to discuss at that point. So does it mean when you're face to face with somebody, or could it be when you're on the phone?
yeah.
Come on in, you two. Here's your copies.
Thank you.
It could be on the phone, right? I think if you know how to talk about agency, you can turn it into a plus really, really easily. And by that, do you think if somebody says, you know, they call you on the phone, you're the first person they've talked about real estate? Probably not. Can somebody run another copy or two for Guy? You're probably not the first person they talk to, and you're probably not the last person they're going to talk to. So the key is, how do you turn that into, how do you broach the subject of agency on the phone? Anyone got any ideas? Would that have been through my class already? Okay, I got an idea. It's pretty simple. Bob, has anyone talked to you about agency yet?
No.
Okay. The state says before any confidential information is exchanged, we need to discuss agency. And here's the best line you use. And it's in your best interest if we talk about that. Do you get that? That to me is the key line, because when you say it's in their best interest, what does that mean to them?
You're looking out for
They're
them.
looking out for them. And if they've answered the first question, is then, you know, have you talked to anybody about real estate? And they say yes. Have they talked to you about agency? And then they say no. And then you actually tell them, or you ask that question, you're separating yourself from everybody else out there. So the question's very simple. Has anybody talked to you about agency? No. It's in your best interest that I go over agency with you. So you explain it to them that way. Now, you go take an hour to go over 3 pages of agency over the phone? No. If they're talking to you about listing their home, is all you're going to say is, and remember, words are key, what you say. Most people say, if I list your home, I'll be representing you, right? What's a better way of wording that?
When I listen.
When I list your home, okay? You're creating a mindset for them that when I list a home, when I list your home, I'm going to be representing you. okay? I will be doing things, my fiduciary duty is to you, okay? So you're wetting the whistle. You're not going over everything on the phone as far as agency, but you're talking to them and you're creating rapport. So you've already established that it's in their best interest and you're gonna watch out for them. And it's the same thing with, on a buyer side. If you don't understand agency to the point where you can explain it to your client so they understand it properly, you're gonna have problems with the whole transaction. I'm telling you that right now, okay? There's 3 types of agency, right? This is the audience participation part.
Yes.
What would they be?
Buyer, seller, and dual.
Correct. Okay. Also, did you turn around and grab your form?
Thank you.
Also, what we're going to talk about is designated agency. Can anybody, what's designated agency? You guys still sleeping? Do I need to get some candy? You guys on a sugar high here or what? Go ahead, Bruce.
Well, I mean, that you are their agent, not just Keller Williams.
Okay, that's a start. Does anybody know why designated agency was put in place?
So we didn't have a dual agency in the office all the time?
To eliminate as many dual agency scenarios as possible. In a designated agency office like ourselves, how do you get into a dual agency scenario?
You list the house and you brought the buyer yourself.
Correct. If we weren't a designated agency office, how would you get into a dual agent scenario?
Anybody in the office bring a client.
If Lon had a listing and Craig brought a buyer, that would be a dual agency scenario.
Because
Okay.
the whole office is.
The whole office is potentially a dual agency scenario. In a designated agency office, the only way you guys, the agent, gets into a dual agency scenario is if you have the buyer and you have the seller. And you have to have the buyer under a buyer's agency contract. But where people goof up, because it ties into dual agency, you need to explain you need to understand dual agency very simple and be able to explain it very simple. Can anybody explain dual agency to me?
You represent both buyer and seller, and both parties know that you're handling both sides of the transaction.
Okay, what if I was a seller? I'm at a listing, you're at a listing and you're going over dual agency. What would you say to me?
I would say, Bob, if I brought in a buyer, I still have my fiduciary duties to you first, and I will present the best offer. I would do it as if it was any other buyer, whether it was brought by me or not. And if you agree with it, we can proceed. If you're not comfortable with it, we don't have to.
Okay, when you say if you agree with it, if they agree with dual agency or if they agree with the offer? You lost me there.
Dual agency.
Okay. Now let me ask you guys, and this is, you actually went down a path that I kind of wanted you to go down, which I don't want you to go down, when in real life. If dual agency is explained properly, it's never going to be an issue to a buyer or seller, okay? And that's where people screw things up, is they explain it, the seller goes, well, forget it, I don't want to do dual agency.
But you
I
have to
want
state
you
that you're working in the best interest of the seller, because I mean, that's your first fiduciary
You
responsibility.
can't, as a dual agent, you are not working in the best interest of the seller. You actually are working in the best interest of both, and they do lose some fiduciary responsibility. There's no doubt about it. So that's why getting rid of dual agency, as many as we can, is important. However, it doesn't mean you don't want to be in dual agency. If you understand it, it's not a big deal. I have never had a problem with dual agency, ever, in 22 years. Now, the first 7 years, there's probably no such thing as dual agency. Dual agency didn't come around till, what happened before dual agency, to create dual agency? Does anyone know?
Buyer agency.
Buyer's agency. Prior to that, when I got into the business in 1992, I think, there was no such thing as buyer's agent. Who did you work for? Go ahead, I couldn't hear that.
For the seller.
The seller. Whether you were showing a buyer a home or not was irrelevant. You were working for the seller. Your fiduciary duty was to the seller. If I was showing my brother a house, my responsibility wasn't to my brother, it was to the seller. Okay? NAR, National Association of Realtors, runs a survey and asks the clients who was representing you, and what did all the buyers say? The agent. Well, that's not true. They weren't getting represented. So along comes buyer's agency. Now you have buyer's agency and you have dual agency right after. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Okay? Believe me, this all ties in as we get going. So Lon, since you did an excellent job reading before and I'd given you a week or two off, have at it, starting at the top. You just get Lon's voice, you don't get to see Lon on video.
Yes.
That'll be even better, Lon. We'll be able to hear your voice out there.
I'll be like,
Now she's going to change it.
I'll be like Robin Lee. She'll be like the narration. You don't have to see me. Just-
Exactly.
Disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships. Before you disclose confidential information to a real estate license regarding a real estate transaction, you should understand what type of agency relationship you have with that licensee. A real estate transaction is a transaction involving the sale or lease of any legal or equitable interests in real estate consisting of not less than one or more than 4 residential dwelling units or consisting of building site for a residential unit on either a lot as defined in section 102,
Blah, blah, blah.
blah, blah, blah. Yeah. An agent providing services.
Okay, hold on right there.
Oh, sure.
If you're doing with commercial buildings, do you have to disclose agency?
Same thing, isn't it?
Huh?
Isn't that the same thing?
What did this just say?
Residential.
No.
Not.
It's residential, okay? If you're selling an apartment complex that has 8 units in it, do you have to disclose agency?
No.
No. 1 to 4. The reason being is, it's funny, because Mike and I went and had dinner or lunch with our E&O attorney 2 days ago. We were talking about the same thing. You're dealing with a much more sophisticated buyer when you get into commercial, and it's assumed that they're going to have legal representation. So they're saying that because of that, agency is not as important as it is for us. Okay? Go ahead, Lon.
Okay. An agent providing services under any service provision agreement owes, at a minimum, the following duties to the client.
What's a service provision agreement? What type of office basically are we? Don't say designated office. If you're filling out a listing, it asks you a question. To the point, it says, basically, are we a full service? Okay, then there's limited service, right? What's the difference? And what are we?
We're full service.
Well, we are full service. We are going to do everything from A to Z. Limited service means I'm going to put it in the multi-list. You're going to pay me X amount, and I'm going to do anything for you. I'm going to walk away from it, and you're on your own. Okay? What this is saying, it doesn't matter if you're limited or full. These 6 or 7 things, everybody has to do. So go ahead and read them, Lynn.
The exercise of reasonable care and skill in representing the client and carrying out the responsibilities of the agency relationship, the performance of the terms of the service provision agreement, loyalty to the interests of the client, compliance with the laws, rules, and regulations of this state and any applicable federal statutes or regulations, Referral of the client to other licensed professionals for expert advice related to material matters that are not within the expertise of the licensed agent. And accounting in a timely manner of all money and property received by the agent in which the client has or may have an interest. Confidentiality of all information obtained within the course of the agency relationship unless disclosed with the client's permission or as provided by law, including the duty not to disclose confidential information to any licensee who is not an agent of the client.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if you're full service, limited service, or anything in between. You have to represent your client with those things in mind. Okay? Then, number 2, Lon.
A real estate broker or real estate salesperson acting pursuant to a service provision agreement shall provide the following services to his or her client. When the real estate broker or real estate salesperson representing a seller or lessor, the marketing of the client's property in the manner agreed upon in the service provision agreement.
So if it's a full service, and you're going to do this, this, and this, you have to do it. If you tell them that the only thing you're going to do in the MLS is put it in the MLS, that's all you have to do. Whatever you tell them, you have to do it. Okay?
Acceptance of delivery and presentation of offers and counteroffers to buy, sell, or lease the client's property or the property the client seeks to purchase or lease. Assistance in developing, communicating, negotiating, and presenting offers, counteroffers, and related documents or notices until a purchase or lease agreement is executed by all parties and all contingencies are satisfied or waived. After execution of a purchase agreement by all parties, assistance as necessary to complete the transaction under the terms specified in the purchase agreement. For a broker or associate broker who is involved at the closing of a real estate or business opportunity transaction, furnishing or causing to be furnished to the buyer and seller a complete and detailed closing statement signed by the broker or associate broker showing each party all receipts and disbursements affecting that party. Michigan law requires real estate licensees who are acting as agents or sellers of buyers of real property to advise the potential sellers or buyers with whom they work of the nature of their agency relationship.
Okay, I want to go back to E. What does E, the last part of E, talk about? Who's had a closing so far? Okay, you got a closing statement, right? On the bottom of that closing statement, there's a line besides the seller or buyer. Who goes on that line? You guys aren't paying attention. Lon's doing an excellent job reading here.
My
You
guess
guys
would
are
be the title
missing.
agent?
What's that?
My guess would be the title agent.
Nope. A detailed closing statement signed by the broker or associate broker. Is that pretty clear?
Okay.
Do you guys not pay attention when he's reading? I mean, we can move this till midnight and see if that works out any better for anyone. Who's had a listing? Who's closed down a listing? Okay, Bruce. Bruce is the only one. Everyone else is buyer's side. Okay. If there is a listing, guess who's supposed to be signing that paper? That would be me. Okay? If it's a buyer, who's supposed to be signing the listing? Or who's supposed to be signing the closing statement? You? Not, you have to speak up. You have to be on or TV too, or camera, or whatever.
I'm too close, though.
The other broker. This listing broker is the one who always signs the papers. So if it's a buyer's side transaction, the other side is the one who should be signing the broker form.
Oh, makes sense.
Our listing, I sign. Other listing, the other broker is supposed to sign. Nobody signs it or Charlie or Andy from First Centennial sign it for me, or, bottom line is you guys need me to look at those. Okay? We clear on that? If it's a listing, I need to sign it.
You're talking about
The
when you take the
closing
listing, when you
statement.
close,
The closing statement, not the HUD. There's a real estate section and a closing statement. And if you guys want, I'll have Jennifer and I can do a class on closing paperwork that you guys should be reviewing.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So we'll work on that. All right, seller's agent. I'll give Lon a break for a second.
I got you, Pete.
You got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Carry on.
You're on camera, man. I got you. No worries.
Hey, if I move my lips and he reads, is it going to look like I'm talking?
Seller's agents. A seller's agent under a listing agreement with the seller acts solely on behalf of the seller. A seller can authorize a seller's agent to work with sub-agents.
Stop right there. What's a sub-agent?
get that one, gets me every time.
This is what I'm saying. You guys need to know this stuff inside and out. What's a seller's agent? I kind of gave it to you earlier, but I didn't call it that. Or a sub-agent.
Same office?
Nope. Back in the dinosaur days, when I got into the business, everybody was a sub-agent of the listing agent, okay? Real Estate One listed a property, you had a buyer, you were a sub-agent of the Real Estate One office, okay? Because you had who was your fiduciary duty to?
Seller.
The seller. So you were a sub-agent of that company, the other company. Can you still be a sub-agent? Sure. I don't know why anybody would want to. Okay, who's filled out a profile sheet to put into the MLS? Anybody? Okay. On it, does it talk about sub-agency? Can't hear you. Everybody has to speak loud so they can get on
I
tape.
said I don't remember.
It does.
It gives you three options, right?
Yeah.
Sub-agency, buyer's agency, transaction coordinator. What is our policy as far as sub-agency?
It's a no, but everybody puts yes.
When you're offering out, on our side, if you're listing a property, we do not offer out sub-agency at all. And I don't want you really guys offering out transaction coordinator, but that's not quite as important. Why don't I want you guys offering out sub-agency? You guys need to think today. You're not bringing your A game. I gotta get up and bring my A game every day.
Well, if they're working with a listing agent and it's not with the company, you don't want to be involved with the other side, right?
You're almost there, yeah. Because if I list a property, now remember, it'd be I listed the property, okay? And you guys work for XYZ Realty. Let me back up a second. Who's ever set an appointment? Do they ever ask anymore who you're representing, buyer or seller? They actually do. You guys just don't pay attention to it. Because I don't get it all the time, but once in a while I'll get it. You're representing the buyer. When you, in most cases, you're setting an appointment, right? If somebody calls us and sets an appointment and they aren't working as a buyer's agent, who are they working for at that point? If I was to say, Bob, you call in to set an appointment on my listing on Main Street, and our front desk said, are you representing the buyer or seller? And if they say, well, I'm representing the seller, because you don't have a buyer's agency contract with somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a buyer's agency contract with someone, who are you representing in theory? The seller. Okay? So, Bob calls me up later on in the day, and I'm talking to Bob, and I tell Bob that, hey, my $150,000 house, you know, write me an offer for $130,000. Can Bob tell his client that?
No.
Why no? And you have to speak louder, Stacy. I'm going to be on tape. You're going to be on tape.
Well, they don't have a contract yet.
No, it's because you had the right answer, wrong reason. It's kind of like math problems in school. You come up with the right answer, that doesn't matter, you have to have the explanation. You have to show your work. You've got... Lost my train of thought. Your agency relationship, who in theory is he working for? The seller, right? So he can't disclose it to the buyer because he's representing the seller. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that from a designated agency point of view. But if I tell Bob something and Bob goes and tells his client, who's in trouble? Bob is, and I am,
Oh.
right? So from a sub-agency point of view, I don't know Bob's business practices, right? From another company, how do I know Bob's business practices? So what you're doing by saying we're not offering sub-agency, we're putting a wall up. I'm representing my clients. You go ahead and represent yours. And that's your warning to sit here and say, I'm not going to say something stupid that's going to come back and, bite me. So it's just very clear. We do not offer out sub-agency, plain and simple. And there's really, this ties into the next thing. Why would Bob ever be working with a client, okay, wouldn't even be a client at that point, a customer, and not, why would Bob's customer not want representation? Because that would be true, right? If Bob doesn't have a buyer's agency contract with them, that customer has no representation. They're not even a client yet. So I'll ask the question. This is actually a question. Why do you think that happens?
It's either you don't ask and or they're working with somebody else.
I'm going to make it very simple for you guys. Agents are clueless and don't know how to explain agency. Because if I explain agency proper to a client, wouldn't they want agency representation?
Sure.
Is there any reason somebody wouldn't want agency representation? I can tell you why. We'll see if you guys are smart. Because along with agency representation and a buyer's agency contract, what are you signing? A contract, right? And people don't want to get tied into anything long-term. But we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. So, go ahead.
Buyer's agents and or transaction coordinators. A sub-agent of the seller is one who has agreed to work with the listing agent and who, like the listing agent, acts solely on behalf of the seller. Seller's agents and their sub-agents will disclose to the seller known information about the buyer, which may be used to the benefit of the seller.
Okay, give me an example of where an agent or a seller's agent might find something about a buyer that could really benefit the seller.
Motivation.
Their motivation.
They're getting kicked out of their, month or so.
That's if they're getting kicked out of a place, that would be to the seller, run away from the
Not
buyer.
kicked out, but I mean, I'm sorry, their lease agreement expires and they got to get out in a month. So I mean, they're extremely motivated to buy.
Okay. Here's one. Do you guys know what a straw buyer is?
Somebody purchasing something for someone else.
When do you think that would play in effect? Come into effect?
Could be a parent for a child.
Here's a really good one. Pro athlete moving into town decides he wants to buy a house. Goes looking for homes, and everybody sees Mr. Pro Athlete out there buying, looking at a house. You think the price of business just went up? They're gonna, he can afford this house, we're gonna jack the price up, or we're not gonna come down at all. So what they do a lot of time is they have an agent go out and purchase the house under basically someone's name, and then it gets switched over. I used to work for McDonald's, and that was one of the things. McDonald's bought more land than anybody, pretty at one point. They were the largest landholder in the country.
Yeah.
Okay? They never bought under their own name. They always they had a company go purchase the land, because don't you think that anytime somebody saw McDonald's was coming to town, they were going to jack the price up of something? So it's the same thing. A straw buyer, So if the seller, if the agent found out that this is who's truly buying the house, they've got to tell their client that. So you got to be careful when you're the buyer's agent, what you're doing. What's in the benefit of the buyer may not be in the benefit of the seller, and vice versa. And that's why we have agency. So you're clearly representing the right client. Go ahead, buyer's agent. Oh, sorry, we missed that paragraph. Sure.
Individual, individual services may be waived by the seller through execution of a limited service agreement. Only those services set forth in paragraph blah 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 above may be waived by the execution of a limited
So
service.
if you go back to page 1, it talks about paragraph 2, only B, C, and D get waived. Okay? So why don't the other ones all go into the top ones that can't get waived? All right. We're not going to read buyer's agent because the buyer's agent is the same thing as the seller's agent, except you're dealing with the buyer, correct? Do you guys have any questions on the seller or buyer's agency part? Are you guys awake?
Yes.
Killing me. All right, we talked a little bit about dual agency. If you're going to list a property, a lot of times, not just listing property, a lot of times in this business, it's not what you say, it's when you say it, okay? If I list Bob's property and I don't go over dual agent, who's ever done a listing presentation? You have? Did you go over dual agency?
Yes.
Okay, because you went through my class. If you don't discuss dual agency and you just go over seller's agency because I'm representing the seller, you're going to have a problem because that'll be the one house that, guess what? You're going to end up in a dual agency scenario. And if the first time you bring up dual agency is when you get an offer, and I say, Nick, hey, got an offer for you, we're in a dual agency. He's going to say, what's dual agency? And I'm going to say, well, at that point in time, at this point in time, I can't represent you as well as I was going to because I have to also represent the buyer. Nick's not going to be happy with that, is he? However, if when I'm doing my listing presentation and I go over agency and I talk about seller's agency and I talk about dual agency and I say, Stacy, dual agency it's pretty simple. That's going to happen if I bring a buyer that I have under contract to your house and they want to write an offer. And what that means is what you tell me stays confidential and what they tell me stays confidential. So if we're negotiating the price on your $200,000 house and they say they want to write an offer for $180,000, but they're willing to come up to $185,000, I can't tell you that. Just like Stacy, if you came back to me and said, go back to them and tell them, I want $195,000, but you tell me that I'll accept $190,000, you wouldn't want me to tell you, you wouldn't want me to tell them that you'd take $190,000, right?
Right.
Okay, so you see, what you tell me stays confidential, what they tell me stays confidential. And I make a little humor of it, I'll say, Stacy, bottom line is, what you tell me stays on the right side of my brain and what they tell me stays on the left, and that's how I handle things. Nothing crosses that. Are you okay with that, Stacy? Okay, and some people may say that. What's your concern?
I guess if we're gonna be working together, I would like everyone to be honest. I mean, I'm always a pretty honest person.
And you're right, honesty is very important to me, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I can't, you want me to be honest, and you don't want me to tell them something you don't want me to. So that's why I'm going to just basically relay the facts as you tell me. I'm being very upfront and honest with you, okay? Most of the time, that works for 99% of the people if you explain dual agency. Then I always have my fallback one that I've never had to use yet. Stacy, why'd you hire me?
Because you know a lot.
Okay? There's a lot of people that know a lot out there. Why me?
Well, you're a broker.
Good link. That's a good answer. No one's brought that one up. A lot of brokers out there too. Some of you guys know where I'm going with this, right, Craig? what I want them to say is, you're the best person for the job. Nobody's going to, in their mind, Lon, would you go out and hire the second best person for the job?
No, sir.
So, Lon, you think I'm the best person for the job?
Yes, sir.
You're right. I think I'm the best person for the job too. And why I say that is, what I found over the last, and this is my conversation with them, what I found over the last 22 years of doing real estate, most problems are created by agents, not by sellers and buyers. It's because agents didn't do things the right way. So in this case, unless I get into a fight with myself, this is going to be a much smoother transaction, because I don't have to worry about what this agent does or doesn't do. And it's exactly what I tell people. Because, and it's true, all the problems that I deal with at the broker level, out of all the problems, I should say, I would bet 98% of them are caused by agents. Not understanding agency, not understanding their own purchase agreement, not understanding our purchase agreement, things along those nature. If you explain dual agency to them, so now when that offer comes in, Stacy, I come back to you and say, hey, Stacy, I got great news. I got an offer on the house, and do you remember when we talked about, when I listed your property, we talked about dual agency. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That's the situation we're in. So from now on, just make sure you only tell me what you want me to know, and I can only, I will go back and forth with you as far as information, what you tell me, just like what they tell me. I can't violate your trust. You're fine if you explain it to them that way. Explain it then, and you explain it at the time the offer comes in, it's a non-issue. If you don't explain it at the time you list the property, it's going to be an issue. I can promise you that. Okay? Let me ask you something on dual agency. Forget about dual agency for a second. If you're writing an offer on a RE/MAX listing and your client says, what should I offer? What's your answer? So what do you do?
Based on the comps, I would stay within like 10,000, depending on,
So you're going to run comps.
yeah.
Okay. Good answer. Can you run comps if you're in a dual agency situation?
I don't know.
You
Who
can-
says yes? Who says no? Who says nothing? You can run comps for the buyer, but they better be the exact same comps you gave the seller. Does that make sense? Because if I tell Alex that her house is worth 200 as a listing, and I come back to Bob and say, yeah, go offer 160. Someone's going to be mad at me, right? And I'm not doing my fiduciary duty at that point. Now, is it possible that when I listed the house it was worth 200? Now, thank God the market's going in the opposite direction, but there were times 5 years ago that's exactly what was happening. But where agents were messing up and agents were causing problems, and I'm surprised more agents didn't get in trouble. It was their responsibility to check prices, whether it was weekly, monthly, whatever, and tell them, your house is overpriced. You need to lower it to this. Now, if they didn't do it, that's their prerogative. But if they didn't tell them that, that's the agent's mistake. There were agents, I hate to say this, that were putting people in bad positions and were probably losing their homes because they didn't react quick enough. You guys get that? So, if I give the seller comps at 200, the comps I'm given better be for the exact same thing. So, if the client says, what should I write my offer at? And it's listed at 200, well, we know they'll take 200, right?
Pretty fair.
I mean,
That's pretty fair.
it's, so it's hard to sit here and say, well, go in at 180. You can't really say that. So how you handle your buyer at that point is very important. So
just taking their homes off the market because of the values, or were they willing to accept less?
Some people were, some people would take less. Some people, remember in real estate, you're always gonna have transactions. People get married, people get divorced, people die, people have kids. All of those 4 things, and that nobody thinks that. Those 4 things, and people have job transfers.
Yeah.
Those 5 things pretty much dictate the market more than anything else. Okay? So, yeah, there were people that were in a world of hurt that couldn't sell. And that, hence the term the short sale came into effect. Thank God that's going by the wayside now. You know, so it was a crazy time. So, all right. So now, who can explain dual agency to me? Do I have to go back to this again?
So you're
To
kind
explain it from the point you're explaining it to a client.
of, you're representing the seller and the buyer? Something like that?
Equally. Keep going. Gotta be more to it.
Man, that's all I got.
I'll give it a shot.
Go ahead.
Mr. Klein, Pete, dual agency is, I'm fiduciarily responsible to you and obligated to you to represent you in the sale of your home. However, if I have a buyer that I have under contract that's interested in your home to present that offer, then I will be working as an agent for you as well as a fiduciary responsibility to them. Would that be an issue for you as we list this property?
Well, Lon, that sounds good, but just what exactly, when you say you're gonna be working for both of us, how's that gonna work?
Sure, that's a great question. If I bring the buyer to you, then I can't disclose any personal information or pertinent information that will hurt the buyer in purchasing your home, as well as I will have the same obligation to you to not disclose any information that would suggest a lower price or a rush to sell or anything of that nature. So it would essentially be me providing neutral services to both parties to assure that each party is represented fairly, honestly, and that's what my fiduciary responsibility would be.
Okay. And that's good, the price example, because at the end of the day, what's the client, what's the biggest thing for the client?
Price.
Price, right? So if you use the price example like I was talking about, so your house is worth 200, what I'm, if the seller or the buyer says he wants to write the offer at 180, but he's willing to come up to 190, I can't tell you that, Lon. However, you wouldn't want me to tell them that you're willing to take 190 if you countered at 195, right? You wouldn't want me to tell them that. So if you use that example, that's something people can grasp and put their hands around, okay? But that was pretty good. So, but one thing I tell you guys, when do most people practice their scripts and dialogues?
When you're in front of a customer?
Right. They're shooting live bullets, right? That is the problem. There's 2, 3, 5, 10 of you in here. Do you think if every day you practiced your scripts and dialogues on listings and stuff like that? I mean, I know Mike's callers and those guys practice all the time. But we practice in front of live people. And guess what happens if you screw up? You don't get the listing, right?
Retraction.
Wouldn't you guys rather screw up with each other? I mean, seriously.
Absolutely.
So I don't understand why you guys don't do this. I was a firm believer, people, I always hear about scripts and dialogues. And I don't have scripts and dialogues. What are you talking about? I started thinking about it about 5 or 6 years ago, and I go, I have scripts and dialogues. They're just so internalized that I don't even think of them that way. That's just, I can rattle it off. For someone to get for me not to be able to overcome an objection, they'd really have to go pretty far. Because I think I can overcome pretty much anything at that point. And the other part is when you do go on a listing appointment, does anybody ever stop and think about what went right or what went wrong? What did I do good? Did I do bad? Self-analyze, whether it's a buyer or a seller. I've got some frustrating clients right now, and Cindy and I talk about this all the time, and I'm constantly changing now what I'm going to accept and what I'm going to do. Because if you don't, the old saying, same action, same results, right? That's insanity.
Sure.
So, all right. A real estate licensee can be the agent of both the buyer and the seller in a transaction. But here's the key. But only with the knowledge and informed consent in writing of both the seller and the buyer. There is a separate form that you have to have if you're in a dual agency scenario. A dual agency form. Dual means what?
More than one.
Two.
This is not Richard Nixon, by the way. This is two. Two contracts. Okay, you already have one with the seller, right? The listing agreement. So before you go into a dual agency agreement, what else do you need?
Exclusive buyer?
A buyer's agency contract. So you've got a listing contract, a buyer's agency contract, and then you're going to get moved in, or merged into a dual agency agreement. All right? In such a dual agency situation, the licensee will not be able to disclose all known information to either the seller or the buyer. As a dual agency, the licensee will not be able to provide the full fiduciary range of duties to the seller or the buyer. You do lose some things. The obligations of a dual agent are subject to any specific provisions set forth in the agreement between the dual agent, the seller, and the buyer. What's a transaction? Any questions on dual agency?
I have a question. So just for clarification, upon doing a listing, you want to have them agree for dual agency right off the bat?
Absolutely. I'm
Okay.
going to talk about dual agency. I will even go as far as down below in the check boxes here,
Sure.
where it says dual agent,
Mm-hmm.
mandatory buyer contract and dual agency agreement. I will write possible. That's my, and I'd probably have them initial it too.
Okay.
Because that tells me, and it tells them that guess what I did at the listing? I went over dual agency. So when the time comes and I say, hey, Lon, do you remember when we talked about dual agency? They're not going to be able to say, no, you didn't. Well, yes, I did, because here you initialed it.
Okay, so that part is very clear to me. Now, if I'm the agent on this property, I get a signed call, hey, I looked at this property, I want to see it. Are you working with anyone? No.
Now,
So-
here is the $6 million question.
Okay.
Who are you representing?
At that point, I'm representing the seller.
Why? And this
Because I
is
have
where,
no-
and that, you have the attitude every other agent out there
Buyer's
has.
not in the country.
Because I don't have an agreement with them. They're a customer at that point.
What's the first thing you have to do?
Agency.
You have to explain agency, right?
Mhm.
And if I explain agency, okay, whose choice is it to figure out how they're being represented? Is it the agent,
It'll be the customer,
the customer slash client?
client,
Right.
yeah, still customer at that point.
So if I explain agency to you on the phone, and I explain the benefits of agency, who's not going to want to be represented?
Everybody should.
Pretty much everyone's going to be wanting
Sure.
represented, right?
Mhm.
It's because the agent doesn't do a good enough job explaining agency. Now, by taking it the next step, you're right. Well, Lon, I've explained to you about agency, okay, and if we went and looked at a house that was listed by RE/MAX, I could represent you a buyer's agent, okay? But the best scenario I can represent you today, since it's in my house, is in a dual agency situation. Are you okay with that?
Sure, yes.
Okay. What I'm going to what I'm going to need you to do is sign a buyer's agency contract. And this is where it gets sticky, right?
Okay.
Nobody wants to sign a buyer's agency contract at the first meeting. So what do you do? Why do most people, let me rephrase that, why don't most people want to sign a buyer's agency contract early on?
They don't want to get locked into a contract.
Pretty much a long-term contract, right?
Right.
Did I say anything about how long that buyer's agency had to be? Could it be for that one listing?
Yeah,
Could be for one day.
yeah.
Could be for an hour. I could care less how long it is. Okay? So now that you've explained agency, now that you've had them sign a buyer's agency contract, guess what situation you're in?
Dual.
You're in a dual agency situation. Most experienced agents, they're the ones that have an issue with that scenario. You guys, as newer agents, for the good part is you get it, and you know that you're going to go from here to here. Most agents will say, well, my seller doesn't want to be in a dual agent, doesn't want me to be in a dual agency situation. Why do you think that is?
And explain it.
Exactly. They didn't explain it properly. So, my point that I was saying about before, who screws up more deals than anybody? Agents. It's
Okay.
not hard to see how it happens.
Can I ask you a question about dual agency and just throwing it out there? What about when you're on a team like us?
Well, and it's funny because
That's it.
we talked a little bit about that in Con Ed. My belief is if you're showing one of Mike's listings or whatever, you're in a dual agency situation, and that's the philosophy I want you guys to have.
Okay.
Okay, and the reason being, there's a term out there called imputed knowledge. That you have knowledge of what's going on. You guys are walking back and forth, you're hearing, Mary Jo talk to things, Stephanie talk to things. You can't help but hear something. Now, with you guys though, maybe I should probably change that because you guys don't hear anything when you're in this situation.
Understood. No.
No, you guys are in a dual agent situation. Anyway, look at it. Okay? So, and it's just easier that way. You keep your client's information to yourself and let them keep their client's information to themselves. All right?
Well,
That's
transaction.
actually what they do. Like Mary Jo had a listing, and we went to put an offer on it, and they would act just like any other agent. She said, maybe you want to do this, maybe you want to do that, but they would not tell you numbers or what to
Right.
do. Or,
Yeah, she wouldn't. I had
She
the same
wouldn't.
issue.
No, you gotta represent your client.
And you may want to know that because you don't want to be cocky with your clients because, oh, it's our listing, no worries, we got this.
Well,
Because
the other reason why I'm asking is we get the calls coming in for people that are calling about a listing. They're at
Yeah.
the house or whatever.
Right.
And, they're asking information about it. Do we approach, do we go right into the, letting them know about the disclosure then,
You have to
I
talk
agree.
about
Yeah.
that. You have to explain agency.
Probably
And then
down
you
the
come
road.
down the path of agency as we will be in a dual agency situation on this property because it is listed with our team. So,
See, in my opinion, the reason that, when I've run into this so far, I explain it up front for the simple fact, we may look at it that the person is thinking, you're gonna give my confidential information away, but I see it the opposite.
Right.
I think the buyer is maybe saying, oh, I can get a good deal because this is, I want you to understand clearly, that is another agent, this is completely different as to the way we approach the situation. So I don't want them looking for some, easy transaction as far as a good price, or like you're gonna get something,
right.
versus the other way. So I'll make sure I
And
do
that's
it
a
that
smart
way.
thing to do.
Yeah.
All right, what's a transaction coordinator?
So I just want to ask one more quick question. Because I can relate to what they're saying. What's the best way to explain that? Say, for instance, you get a sign call and it's one of, Mary Jo's listings, and they're asking, can I go see it, have a showing right now? Is that at that point in time, do I need to thoroughly explain dual agency to them? Or how should I really, go about that? What's the best way?
That's kind of what we've been talking about all along.
I know, but I mean,
You explain agency, you have to explain agency, and then you flat out say, at this point in time, this property is listed with our company. So the best way I can represent you is in a dual agency scenario. And you have to explain, dual agency. So, yeah, that's exactly what it has to be, right up front. Okay? Transaction coordinator. Bob, what are you doing back there? Cheater? You too. Remember, I'm looking right at you.
recording you. Yeah, my.
She's recording you too. Transaction coordinator. Greg?
Let's say, like my neighbor across the street is buying his cousin's house. He knows I'm an agent, and he says, "Hey, can you just put the deal together for us?"
Okay. And that's how most people look at transaction coordinators. And why do they look at it that way? What do the clients want at that point?
Just to make sure everything is done legally and everything's done
And what else?
No
correctly.
commission.
Either no or low commission.
Yeah.
Usually
Save
low.
money.
How much can you charge me to put the papers together? Which is fine. That's exactly what they're looking for, low commission. Commission has nothing to do with agency. Are we in agreement there? Can I sell a house and charge somebody nothing?
Good.
Yeah, but that would be kind of weird.
Can you guys sell a house and charge nothing?
No. You might not like it. But you might not like that, so no.
The answer to that is, you better talk to me first. No, which is true. If there's somebody who wants a commission cut, you need to talk. And we'll work something out there. So what happens is people say, okay, I'm going to do it as a transaction coordinator, so I'll cut my commission. If your neighbor, let's say, Craig, you have a relationship or a friendship with them, why wouldn't you be, and they're selling their house, okay? Why wouldn't you be the seller's agent? Right?
Should be.
You could be the seller's agent just because you're representing your friend. Conversely, if that neighbor was buying a house, could you not be the buyer's agent and still do it for, less commission? Yeah, you could. There's really no reason to be a transaction coordinator. I am a firm believer, if you take money for a transaction and you do it as a transaction coordinator, and if you ever went to court and you had to explain yourself, I just think you'd have a hard time proving that you said, hey, okay, I'm going to take the money, I got no responsibility here. And that's pretty much what you're saying. So it's easier to represent somebody. I've seen like 2 instances in 22 years that I actually agreed with them being transaction coordinators. So it's few and far between. Most times you're going to represent one side or the other.
So question about that. How would it typically go if for sale by owner, person sees it, they call to sign, they're talking to the owner. You got a buyer, you have the owner of the home. They obviously...
Wait, who's got the owner of the home?
Well, it's for sale by owner.
Okay.
So it's your home, it's for sale by owner. I see the sign and I call and I say, hey, how you doing? I rolled by, I want to live in this neighborhood. Not working with anybody, whatever the case. So I want to buy. What do they normally do to get themselves complete? You know what I mean? Because this
What would the seller do in that case?
the seller and the buyer.
Well,
to
and
make
a
sure
lot of
that
times the seller's just going to do it themselves, or hire an attorney and pay more money than they hired an agent. Okay, that's the funny part. But they may have somebody that says, hey, can you help me out here and put it together?
Okay.
But it's usually not necessarily a true for sale by owner that you're going to get into a transaction coordinator scenario.
Okay.
It's more of, Craig's example of a friend
Okay.
that's going to do it. So, all right. A transaction coordinator is a licensee who's not acting as an agent of either the seller or the buyer, yet is providing services to complete a real estate transaction. The transaction coordinator is not an agent for either party and therefore owes no fiduciary duty to either party. Can an attorney be a transaction coordinator? Is that what they're talking about?
They're all licensed.
Oh, right.
If they're
Right.
licensed.
Can they write a purchase agreement for somebody? Sure they can, if they chose to. But a transaction coordinator who's getting compensated, okay, as a transaction coordinator, is a licensee.
I was thinking real estate attorney, so they would have a license. That's why I thought they were.
And that could very well be. But again, if they have a license, and you guys are going to be happy to know, it looks like we're going to bring on an attorney who's going to be licensed. That's what I'm working on now, which might help us in a different aspect. Designated agency. Why was it put in place?
Designed to eliminate dual agency.
To eliminate as many dual agent situations as possible. It eliminates them for who? Kavita, you haven't said anything today. You afraid to be on camera? It eliminates them for the agent. Does it eliminate them for the broker? It does not eliminate them for the broker. My favorite trick question. Who's the broker?
The entity.
Oh, she got it. The entity is the broker. Remember, Keller Williams is the broker. I am the associate. Debbie is. but ultimately, the supervisory broker is me. Everything is under my license. So if you guys screw up, it's my license on the line. But transaction coordinator eliminates it for you guys, but it doesn't eliminate it for me. All right? So a buyer or seller with a designated agency agreement is represented only by agents specifically named in the agreement. You have to explain designated agency to your client, correct? Because there is another form. How do you explain that? I'm bringing sugar next time, because you guys are dead today. How do you explain it? Somebody's got to explain it. And if you're not, I'm scared. I'm going to shut all you guys out of business. Because how can you possibly be out selling homes if you're not explaining designated agency?
It means that they only can talk to me, not to other agents in the office, or if I'm out of town, they can talk to you as a broker. But I don't share any information with other agents, so they just can talk to me. I'm their agent that works for them.
Exactly. You've got to explain to them that the only agent you have an agency relationship is me. If I'm gone and you can't get in touch with me, the only person you should talk to is Pete. Plain and simple. All right? That's really all you need to say to them. From an office point of view, if I'm standing in a meeting and I say, hey, everybody, my house on Main Street's $200,000, but I'm willing to take $180. Can I say that to you guys?
I don't think so.
No,
You
you said
can.
list of home
You
insurance.
shouldn't.
You can, yeah, you shouldn't.
I have a house listed on Main Street. It's $200,000. I'm at the sales meeting. You guys, just want to let you tell our client, we'll take $180.
No.
Now, if we were in a non-designated agency office, could I say that? Why, Bob?
Because we would all be dual agent.
Would we be dual agents, or what would we be? Would be representing
We're
the seller.
We all
Yeah,
sell our
right.
clients, yeah.
Okay, would be representing the seller, so I can't disclose that to the buyer. But in our scenario, as a designated agent office, if I say that, who's in trouble?
You.
That would be me. Let's say you have a client, Bob, at 180 sounds pretty good to them, and you forget to tell them that. Who else is in trouble?
Me.
You are, right? So, what stays, we can't overstep our boundaries and tell people what would accept or what the seller's willing to. If you notice on our sales boards, do you guys know where our sales boards are? They'd be right across from the mailboxes. Just that's not a trick question. On the left-hand board, if you're looking at it, the right-hand side is the listing. The left-hand side's the sales side. There's a column now that's blank. What's that column?
It's the sale price.
Why is it blank? Pending? Those are all pending deals. Okay, now carry on with that statement. That's half of it.
If the deal falls through, you don't want to know what the accepted price was.
We don't want everybody to know. Right. So we used to put the price up there, and we thought, well, we better not. Because, not that anybody's smart enough to remember or whatever, but those are some of the things that we have to do as a designated agency office. The other part is you can't leave stuff laying around on fax machines. It's kind of why we went to an email server to where everything can go directly to your emails. Because if there's paper laying around, guess what somebody can pull that information. That's why you shouldn't be leaving stuff laying around. I am always in a designated or a dual agency situation, if there's two. Any agent of the firm not named in the agreement do not represent the buyer or seller. The named designated agent can act solely on behalf of his or her client and may only share confidential information about the client with the agent's supervisory broker, who is also named in the agreement. Other agents in the firm have no duties to the buyer or seller and may act solely on behalf of another party in the transaction. and we're going to talk about designated agency a little bit more. So you're now checking, I hereby disclose the agency status, the license name below is the seller's agent, buyer's agent, dual agent, and you're not using the bottom two. The next part here, you're always checking the top one here. Initial here, acting as a designated agent. Only the licensee's broker and named supervisory broker have the same agency relationship as the licensee named below. If the other party in a transaction is represented by an affiliated licensee, then the licensee's broker and all named supervisors, brokers, shall be considered disclosed consensual dual agents. That's saying who is a dual agent, the other one says who's not. Again, further, this form is provided to the buyer or seller before what?
Confidential information.
So when does this have to be disclosed? Before any confidential information. It says that 3 times in here. You sign it. This part comes and goes. I don't know why this comes and goes, but this is the form you need to use. This part here is the part that protects you. How do I do that? Or how does that do that? The undersigned does or does not have an agency relationship with any other realtor licensee. Can they have a licensee arrangement with another agent?
If it's opposite side, like if they're selling a home and they're licensed with someone and you represent them on a purchase, so they could.
Okay.
That's a question I actually have too, so I'm glad you
We're
said
going to get to that in a second,
Thank
because
you.
we're going to answer this.
Okay,
So that's the easy answer, but not necessarily the only right answer.
okay.
So you're going to ask the question, do you have, in most times, what are they going to say? I
No.
don't. So you're going to check does not, right? What if they say, oh yeah, I got an agency relationship with somebody. Now you're representing them right now as a listing, okay? So the next, you're finished reading the statement. If an agency relationship exists, the undersigned is represented as a seller or buyer. Now what do you hope at that point, if you're representing them as a seller, what do you hope they're going to say?
Both about the seller and the buyer.
No.
That they have a buyer.
This is where people get
As a
confused
buyer.
on this. It's not how you're representing them, it's if they have representation somewhere else,
Okay.
okay? So if I'm representing Lon as a seller, he's certainly not going to be represented as a seller. I guess he theoretically could be selling something else, okay? That's usually not the case. They could say buyer, right? No big deal. Now the question is, now I'm representing you I'm representing Lon as the buyer. The undersigned, hey Lon, do you have an agency relationship with somebody? Go with yes. So we check yes. What kind of relationship do you have? Are they working with you as a buyer or seller?
Helping me sell my home.
Okay. Again, easy one. Don't have to worry about it. What if they say buyer? Can they do that?
Yes, but
If it's not exclusive.
But we sign exclusive designated agency buyer contracts.
Maybe for a different area.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are getting it. We'll bring this up on Monday.
It's all
There might be
said,
hope
that's
for you.
why.
On the buyer's agency contract, I believe it's number 3, there is a box. Where are you licensed to sell real estate? What time is it, you guys?
9:50.
You gotta go.
Anywhere in Michigan.
Right. Is that in your client's best interest?
No.
No.
So that's the tease. So come back next week and you get the buyer's, actual buyer's agency contract. What if somebody refuses to sign this?
I guess you're not working with
I
them
don't
then?
Do they have to sign it?
No.
For us to
Give them the information if
continue.
they don't.
Now this is where you gotta be careful. In theory, this is not a contract, no, in theory, this is not a contract. What's the front of this?
It's
It's a disclosure. So all we have, what does the law say we have to do?
Disclose
Does it say we have to have them sign it?
No.
Why do we have people sign things?
for their best interest.
To know that they acknowledge.
No, really.
Agree
To
to it.
protect
To acknowledge.
Protect us.
What's that
Protect
answer?
us.
It's not to protect the client, it's to protect us.
Yeah.
That we did our job. Now, having said that, if they refuse to sign it, what I would do is put down presented on this date and time, blah, blah, blah. Because if something comes back, and I've been to court enough, your history is important, okay? If somebody said, well, he never presented that to me, and you showed where you wrote that, and then you showed on all your other deals that you've had, that you presented buyer's agency contract, you've established a history, you're probably gonna be safe. Now, more importantly, if they refuse to sign this, what are you gonna do? I can't watch what I'm gonna say, I was gonna end with a bang, but I can't now.
Turn it off.
Tell him. I'm not working with them. If they're not gonna sign an agency disclosure,
Yeah, it's
do you
gonna
really
trouble.
think they're gonna sign a buyer's agency contract? Or you think they're gonna be a pain in the butt the rest of the transaction? I'd be saying, it was nice me wasting my time explaining this for the last, hour, but you know what? Why don't I send you over to somebody at Century 21? Oh.
Would you take it further and be like, what are you not comfortable?
No, and I probably would. Well, what do I need to sign this for? I can tell you something. I probably wouldn't have to get to page 3 to realize this person's just going to be a pain.
Yeah.
Okay? So at some point in time, you just have to sit here and say, you know what? Is it really worth my time and aggravation to work with these guys? And we'll end with my little story about, I talked to you guys about my pain in the rear end client that I had 2 deals with, and I never followed my own advice. I told you guys, if it doesn't feel right, walk away. It's not worth it. Don't get tied to the dollar. I'm not going to say I got tied to the dollar. I got so into this deal that I wanted to make sure it closed because everything was coming together with, there were too many pieces that I did want to see these deals closed for. And it certainly wasn't my client, I'll be very honest, because this guy was not a nice person. Let's just leave it at that. Finally, they both closed, and this guy's out of my life, I think. But you got to make sure that don't get attached to it. And you're going to know early on. If the guy's giving you a hard time here, you really want to do business